Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lauren Para. I'm the Director of Public Affairs for the Miami Foundation, and thank you all for joining us this evening. If you can, I'm going to ask for just a few minutes of your time to make sure that all of our registrants have enough time to log in, and we'll kick off our event this evening. Thank you for your patience. Thank you all for joining our event this evening, our Miami County Commission District 9 Forum. Please help me welcome the Miami Foundation CEO, Rebecca Fishman Lipsy, who will kick off the event with opening remarks.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here with all of you. My name is Rebecca Fishman Lipsy. I'm the president and CEO of the Miami Foundation, and I want to welcome you all to Our Miami, the People's Forum tonight, focused on County Commission for District 9. This forum would not have been possible without the partnership of 12 nonprofit organizations who helped us to promote this evening, to think through the design of these forums, to curate questions from the community. And so I want to thank all of those partners, as well as the Miami Herald for moderating this evening, and as well as our board and our staff at the Miami Foundation for making the magic happen. So thank you to all of you. These forums matter, and so glad that you're here to tune in on this conversation, because this year, so many of the seats in our county commission are turning over, and based on what voters do, this decision-making body that oversees so many of the issues that matter to the quality of our lives here in Miami will be shaped by what voters do. So you and your choices will matter so much this year, and I'm so grateful that you're here joining us, tuning in. I'm excited to learn alongside you. And on that note, if you are tuning in this evening and you have not yet filled out your census, please open up another browser and take the 10 minutes to fill out your census. That as well is another place where your voice really matters and will impact the future of this region for another decade. And with that, I am thrilled to pass the mic over to our moderator for this forum, which is Dave Wilson from the Miami Herald. Thank you so much.
There we go. Hi, and welcome to the People's Forum, District 9 in the County Commission. Thank you, Lauren, and thank you, Rebecca, and thanks to the Miami Foundation and its many community partners who are supporting this event. Thank you also, and especially to the candidates for your willingness to serve our community. With us today are Mr. Johnny Farias, an electrician, a Navy veteran, a member of the South Bay Community Council. Thank you, Mr. Farias, for your Navy service. Mr. Marlon Hill, partner at the law firm of Hamilton, Miller, and Berthasell, a board member of the Miami Parking Authority, and a past trustee of the Miami Foundation. Mr. Elvis Maldonado, a network engineer, an IT analyst, and a former member of the Homestead City Council. And lastly, we have State Representative Kionne McGhee, an attorney and the outgoing minority leader in the Florida House of Representatives. There is one other candidate in this race, Pastor Mark Coates of the Grace of God Baptist Church. He was unable to join us today. He's also a former county administrator. So the rules for this forum are fairly simple. There'll be an opening question that all candidates will be given an opportunity to answer, limiting their remarks, please, to just 1 minute. Subsequent questions that I ask will be pointed at all of you, or a couple of you, or just one of you as we work through the many topics. I have a lot of questions submitted in advance by members of the community and also the Miami Foundation's partner organizations. I'll be drawing on a lot of those questions. I'll ask each candidate at least one question from the community and identify who posed that question and what part of the city or what area or neighborhood they live in. They self-identified. At the conclusion of the question period, each candidate will have about 90 seconds for a closing statement to summarize your position for the audience. All right, let's get started. So by far, the most prevalent question raised both by the community and by the community partners was about transportation. So they want to know what solutions you propose to ease the difficulties in transportation, both public and private, that residents of District 9, South Miami-Dade encounter on a daily basis. We'll start with Mr. Farias.
Yes. And first I want to thank you, Dave, and it's a pleasure being here. And I want to thank the Miami Foundation and all its partners for putting this together. Dave, transportation is vital in our community, and it's a crisis, okay? My reforms for transportation are these. One, because also transportation, let me just say, also includes the gridlock that we have. So we need to start by a full implementation of the synchronization of the traffic lights. The second thing is rail. It's no secret, I've always been a champion for rail. I sat on the South Dade Corridor Transportation, and one of the things that we recommended was rail. And yes, I know you're gonna hear a lot of people say, oh, but there's no money. But I always say, leaders make this a priority. For instance, if you have a home and you have a leaky roof or a shaky door, you're going to fix what's more important to you. Well, same thing here. Transportation is vital in our community, and I will make it a priority. The other thing is we need to look at other options, for instance, cable cars. In San Francisco, for the last 100 years, they've had cable cars, and they've safely transported citizens from one end of the city to the other end of the city without no problem. So this isn't something that we got to reinvent or pie in the sky. It's something that's been in the United States for years. So that's something that we need to look for other solutions besides what they want to give us.
Mr. Farias, we're running short on time. Thank you so much. Mr. Hill.
Thank you so much, Dave, and thank you to the Miami Foundation and all the partners who have supported this forum. South Miami-Dade County is disconnected from the rest of the county. And we all know that we have many people that live in South Dade, but don't work in South Dade. Transportation is something that we must invest in both in the short term and the long term. We definitely need to look at rail, but we also need to look at other options for the long term. We'll be serving a term of 4 years and possibly 8 years. So what we do in the next chapter in planting the seeds for South Dade's transportation is going to be key. As I knock on doors and I speak to folks, I hear they need relief. They need relief in the short term right now. What does that include? That includes redesigning our bus routing systems so they can get to the backbone of the busway as soon as possible. One other idea that we haven't considered possibly is what about a ferry from Black Point? This has been discussed in the past. That could help mitigate many of the people who are living in Deep South Dade, and to mitigate the travel from downtown to Miami Beach or even to downtown as well. We also need to take a look at the funding mechanisms that are going to invest in these short-term and long-term solutions. Transportation is very complicated. We also need to look at the governance as to how we're going to get these decisions done in the transportation as well.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Mr. Maldonado.
Thank you, everyone, for allowing us to be here today and talk about our platform. You know, I think everyone is clear throughout the United States, and of course, Miami-Dade, any large metropolitan area, traffic is the #1 issue that we're dealing with. And so we need to be clear about what solutions we're going to be providing. First, I'd like to talk about the BRT. We know that right now we have over $100 million that's been geared towards the bus rapid transit system, you know, to South Dade. Is that the answer? Is that the solution that we want right now? No. But the reality is that, you know, those commissioners that are there right now did not want to take the lion's share of the money and just bring it to the South Dade corridor, even though that we are the first and the best in line to have that solution. So as the chair of the Transportation Committee for the Florida League of Cities, I can tell you that those funding for this project is going to be the biggest issue. Where are we going to get our tax dollars or you know, to fund these projects? And funding is going to be the main issue, but that's going to be my top priority, as well as another thought where, you know, instead of having those express lanes that are on the turnpike, we need to turn those into one-way roads, getting everyone to head up north. It takes our residents in the city of Homestead 2 hours to get to the downtown Miami-Dade. So it's a big issue, and I know that we're going to tackle it.
Thank you. Representative McGhee. You're muted, sir. There we go.
Hey, thank you, Dave, and thank you to the foundation for this opportunity. Dave, let's be absolutely clear. The question about whether or not we can afford rail in the South Dade community, that question has been put to bed. Myself, along with the mayors in the South Dade community, we formed a coalition. We were able to identify the funding. The funding could have easily come by this. The only thing we had to do was bond out the PTP tax dollars that our residents have been paying in since 2002. Since 2002, our residents have not been waiting for more buses. Our residents have been waiting for the rail, something they were promised. So only thing we have to do at this particular moment, if we're serious about moving forward, is to bond out a portion of the PTP dollars, push that out, and allow for private partners to come in, a triple P, and allow for that relationship to go. What we can also do is lease out the air rights, allow for these private corporations to come in and own the property rights, the air rights, and therefore they will actually build out the rail. Listen, the rail is not 5 or 6 years down the road. The rail could be here within 3 years. There are many studies that we've shown since we've been fighting the county for the rail, and each and every last one of those studies have shown that what lacks here for the rail is political courage. I can also tell you right now, Dave, is this. We actually fought the county for the rail. We were there. We had a coalition. However, there were people who buckled under the political pressures of Miami-Dade County within our own cities here, like particularly in Homestead. So my thing at the end of the day is this. It's not a question of money. We have the money. The question is political courage. And can anyone show that they're not going to buckle under political pressure? Thanks
very much. Just for the audience, the triple P reference that the representative threw down, that's a reference to a public-private partnership, which is a way of amassing the most money and will to get a project done. So just want to clarify that a little bit. Now, let's change topics a little bit. Many of the questions across all variety of topics came with an overlay of the current circumstance we find ourselves in with COVID and why we're doing this virtually and not in person. So I'm going to ask each of you a question, and many of these are on topics that we will come back to more broadly later in our discussion, but I wanted to get started with some of these specific questions about COVID, and we'll start with Mr. Hill this time. Because of the pandemic, many residents are relying on public parks and spaces for their exercise, fresh air, and seeing people while keeping social distancing. What plans do you have to increase access to public parks in the district?
Well, first and foremost, Dave, if I were the mayor, to be able to issue an executive order, we'll certainly follow the advice of the CDC guidelines that would allow us to really ensure that our public health security is key. Right now, we have a lot of people feeling tension, anxiety with regards to whether or not they're exposed to COVID-19. We know that social distancing works. Social distancing, staying at home, like we are now, working from home, but being in open spaces, outdoor dining, these are the things that we need to be emphasizing as well. We also need to look at the funding that is necessary to provide PPE supplies to people who are vulnerable or people who don't have the resources to do that. Right now, we have an issue down in Deep South Dade with migrant farm workers. We need to ensure that they are supplied with PPE as well. So as it relates to outdoor, we need folks to be exercising outdoors, encouraging people to wear a mask. It's so simple, and to follow the CDC guidelines in order to allow us to reopen safely and healthy.
Okay, but just to go back to the point of the question, do you have any thoughts on increasing access to those public spaces for people in the district, growing park space?
Absolutely. You can distance as long as folks are following the guideline, wearing a mask, distancing in open air, following those guidelines. I think is important for us to exercise the use of our open spaces, certainly.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Maldonado, different question for you. So there's been a tangible benefit that many have observed to the environment as fewer people are driving, fewer people are on the water. So under these COVID guidelines, we're seeing Mother Nature get a little bit of a boost, right? What would you say that we could do to double down on that coming out of the COVID restrictions so that we don't backslide, Biscayne Bay doesn't get all murky and crummy again? Where are you on helping the environment as we come out of COVID?
Thank you for the question. So, you know, I've worked alongside and paid attention to the Resilience 305 plan that we have, talking about sea level rise and the impact that our current situation that we're in right now. So basically, you know, obviously data is a big factor here. My background is in technology. I'm a IT analyst, and so I look at data a lot. And so the data is there clearly. We've seen it through the news that because we're not out driving our cars, we're not creating that carbon footprint or the impact that has affected our county and our states and the country as a whole. I mean, we've seen this throughout the whole world. We've seen where Paris, there's no smog in some other places throughout the world. We've seen those pictures. And so we could clearly see now the impact that we have on, you know, our county. And so, you know, listen, we have leaders and scientists, again, going back to the Resiliency 305 plan that we have implemented. You know, I commend our leaders that have already taken taken charge of the situation that we're in right now. And, you know, I'd add funding to that. I think right now we need to add funding to those plans and to those leaders that are working right now to solve that problem. It's a problem that's not going away. I always reference people back to NOAA to look at the sea level rise, to take a look at, you know, what does 3 and 6 feet of water, you know, how's that going to impact us? I know that we're talking right now about building a seawall, but we have some major issues. And so I would challenge people to go to the NOAA's website, use that little the graph that has data and show the sea level rise. And if you want to get scared or you want to see some problems, look at that.
Thank you very much. Representative McGhee, again, a different question for you, sir. What post-COVID changes or initiatives do you think are necessary so that Miami-Dade County, and also the state of Florida, but specifically Miami-Dade County, is better prepared for the next public health emergency? Because clearly we weren't as prepared for this one as we thought we were.
And that's a great question, Dave. And at the end of the day, it goes back to preparation. One of the things we've noticed here is that Miami-Dade County and its leaders are looking to DC and looking to the state of Florida for answers. When we elect leaders here, one of the things we must understand clearly is how do we gauge political courage? And the political courage that we're looking for from our current leaders, it's not there. So this is what we need to do. Right now, we can tap into the resources, the reserves that the county currently has to deal with the tracers that are actually needed here as we speak. Coming out of this, what we need to do in addition to that is to make sure we have a a plan in place that's geographically sound in order for us to identify hotspots quickly. We could have had basically used our texting system to identify hotspots and allow for tracers to get there sooner. We could have easily reached out to our local farmers. We could have built a relationship to allow for productions from those farmers here in the South Dade community to stay local and go to the local communities in order to help with the food issues that we face. Secondly, we have to look at people and organizations like FarmShare. We should, in actuality, as of today, have a plan that actually fully funds FarmShare from the local level to ensure that we're not going to have that food shortage that we've been seeing. And lastly, it goes back to the question you talked about before. What is it that we can deal with now to talk about coming out of this COVID pandemic that relates to our environment? Transportation. Dave, it goes all the way, it goes back to transportation no matter how we cut this. So at the end of the day, we need a plan, a plan that's very systemic and that would actually help our community. And that deals with transportation and dealing with the food shortages here. And that can be tied up by helping out with our local farmers.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Farias, a new one for you too. So even before COVID-19, affordable housing was an issue in our community, a big one. Now it may be a crisis as people fall behind in rent or mortgage payments, and they may face eviction. So what do you propose to do to address that in the context of the disruption caused by COVID?
Well, look, just today, I saw they rolled out a plan, a $10 million plan to help with rent relief. But it don't start till another week, and that's unacceptable. Okay, to begin with, as a leader, we can't hold hostage money for political reasons or political gain on residents and small businesses that are suffering out there. Okay, to begin with, as county commissioner, the first thing I want to do is put in the Office of Infectious Disease, and it's not adding another layer of government. It's just expanding what we have now with the Office of Emergency Management, what they do with hurricanes. So in this way, we have a budget to have a supply and overstock of PPE, and to make sure that we have a template for more beds, for more doctors, for more personnel. So in case of emergency and that office says we need to move, we can move within days. So not hold the money hostage, make sure that it gets to small businesses. And this is personal to me. I am a COVID survivor. Me and my entire family tested positive, and for 49 days I was quarantined. So I know exactly how this is. And thank God I didn't listen to those data analysis that give these false numbers and put fear in our hearts.
Thank you very much. All right, we're going to start a new round of questions. We're going to start this time with Mr. Maldonado. These are questions that came from specific people in the community. Mr. Maldonado, Pamela Green of Naranja wants to know where you stand on moving funding away from police services and into expanding mental health services.
That's a great question. And I got to be honest with you, as a councilman with the city of Homestead, I dealt with our budget directly. And I know that the police force takes more than about 50% of our budget. But let me tell you something. What the community asks for is more policing. The folks want to make sure that they're feeling safe out in the streets. And right now, as we speak, per capita, we don't have enough officers to even cover, the safety measures that we need. Matter of fact, our officers are being burned out. Maybe part of the problem that we're having with the challenges that the officers are having to the police is the fact that they're being burned out because we don't have enough officers. And so, I get it where we want to defund the police. I know that's the conversation, but they're already running on a deficit. And so I would look for other measures, in order to, bring in funding for community services. I've sat on organizations and nonprofit organizations, and I work with organizations like NALEO, where we use policy and strategic policy in place to, resolve those issues that have to do with mental health, with a healthy community, with education. We have good policy there. We just need to implement it. And someone who's going to carry that policy and make sure it impacts the community in a positive way.
Thanks very much. Representative McGhee, Oscar Londoño of Homestead asks, what concrete local policies you would champion to protect undocumented workers and their families?
Right. We would mirror everything that we've been doing in Tallahassee. We would look at the laws that came out of the Supreme Court recently that basically says to the world, that we're not going to simply identify someone as an undocumented person because Washington, D.C. or the state of Florida and that political party that actually controls it says so. What we need to do is look at the policy and say, if a kid is here and he or she, and they are actual taxpayers, and they are abiding by all the rules, and they are within our community, then we should protect them. And that's the actual language that needs to be proposed and should be proposed, and that must be proposed to the county on the county level. Absolutely not should we be looking at anything short of that. Because at the end of the day, for those who understand the South Dade community, we are a community of migrant workers. We are a community of immigrants. We are a community that's based upon our farming expertise in the areas of Redlands, the deep Redlands, the deep Homestead, the deep Florida cities, the Naranja area, the West Perrine, the West the West Coral areas, Coral Roost areas. So at the end of the day, a policy that actually looks like what came out of the Supreme Court that prevents anyone from infringing upon the rights of individuals within our community is something I would definitely champion, and similar to what I've done in Tallahassee.
Thank you. Mr. Farias, Gabby Lopez of Miami wants to know whether you would work to increase the urban tree canopy throughout the county and how, as an important environmental issue.
Yes, I would work to increase the tree canopy. Look, we got to be a stewards of the earth, okay? And even when I was a Girl Scout leader, by the way, we did a lot of cleanups with the Biscayne Bay and keeping track of making sure that we keep everything clean. And our fresh air, just like our fresh water, is important and vital to us. So yes, I would.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hill. Stefani Johnson of Miami is concerned about overdevelopment, reducing agricultural, natural lands, and the potential for environmental tourism. What would you do to limit development and preserve those types of lands for their uses?
Well, certainly in South Dade, for those folks who have had a chance to visit South Dade and to see that agriculture is one of our #1 industries throughout the state. Small farmers, big farmers, tropical fruit, horticulture, nurseries. It's an extraordinary industry. In regards to development, we must be able to find a balance in terms of smart growth. One of the first things that I would do as commissioner, as a county commissioner, is to bring the stakeholders together with regards to the agriculture community and also our development community and community stakeholders to craft an economic plan for South Dade. We must decide exactly what type of footprint we would like to craft for South Dade, which includes a balance of where people live and also keeping the agricultural community going. So we need to look at the CDMP as well. I'm also not in favor of moving the UDB in regards to development at this time. And so once we have a discussion of convening these stakeholders, we'll be able to craft an economic plan so that we can have a balance with regards to smart growth.
Thank you so much. Okay, now I'm going to throw out a question that all of you can answer, one question, and we'll go again around in order. And this time, Representative McGhee will be going first. And the question is this: gentrification is a concern for many people across the county. How do you balance development, which is inevitable, with the desire to preserve the unique neighborhoods throughout the county, many of which right now are some of our most affordable places to live? Representative McGhee, you lead off.
Great question, Dave, and that is a real question, and it is real as we stand here today. The first thing we can do is look to the county and say to the county, you must assist with the homeownership programs here. You have to do a better job with ensuring that the trust fund that's needed to help support individuals when it comes down to homeownership program, first-time home buyers, that must be implemented. Secondly, there must be a level of personal responsibility. One of the things we can do is come in and say, listen, how do we collectively buy back the block? How do we collectively use our resources to ensure that wealth is maintained within the community? Gentrification is real. That wealth gap is real. When you come down south and you see my brothers and my sisters and my cousins and uncles and friends and colleagues here, you know from the beginning that something is happening in South Dade, but unfortunately the people here are in a position where we lack, in often cases, the resources to stand in a community, to stay in the community and buy up the properties. Why is that? Because number one, the jobs, many of the jobs that we actually need to in this community to grow, they're actually up north. And the reason why they're up north is because we have a failed transportation system that prevents small businesses and individuals within the community from transporting, going back and forth in order to bring in that economic engine that's needed in order to help them prevent gentrification that continues going on. And last but definitely not least, we definitely need the county to look at a comprehensive plan that deals with a reality that it seems that there is a what I call a hand up given to developers over the people in the community. So the power needs to be back with the people.
Thank you very much. Mr. Farias, the subject is gentrification. Where are you on that?
Yes, Dave, and look, this is right up my alley because I'm in construction, I'm an electrical contractor, and housing is a crisis we can no longer ignore. And if we don't tackle this issue now, we're going to lose our resources to be able to pay for the reliable transportation that we need, for secure streets, for quality schools. Okay, residents can no longer rent nor buy in this county. Okay, and we're rapidly losing that. So in this county, we don't have just poor people, and we don't just have rich people. We have everything in the middle. So these are the things that we need to stop that and the gentrification. We need easement relief and permit reform. We need forms of upzoning waivers for areas that are in need of the workforce housing and affordable housing. We need to look at our existing inventory and do smart land acquisitions. And then when the percentages of the 4 levels of housing match the income levels of the county, then and only then will we be able to tackle that issue and stop gentrification.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hill, gentrification, it's all yours.
One of the things, Dave, that I've learned in my 24 years of working in this community on many issues is that you gotta understand exactly when you're not an expert. One of the first things I would do is set up a meeting with Miami Homes for All in adopting their recent report in regards to the recommendations that I'm making with regards to preservation, assistance to renters, land acquisition, and money. That report is definitely a blueprint that we can use to mitigate against gentrification. And another thing about gentrification, Dave, is that we have to look at the community benefits agreements that we have when the county is, or any of the municipalities of these projects that intersect within Miami-Dade County. There must be a balance in with regards to what the community is getting from some of these developments so that we can ensure that the development is in sync with the community's heritage.
Thank you. Mr. Maldonado, your turn. You're muted, sir.
Okay, I'm here. So gentrification is a huge issue in every metropolitan across the U.S. You know, organizations like Urban Planning Developers and Main Street USA have been fighting and have created policy that would help us shape the policy that we need to do in Miami-Dade County. The issue is this: we have too many renters here, and we need to convert that to home ownership. What happens, and I recall this, why I saw this firsthand, and I saw this a long time ago. I used to work for HUD for Section 8. I was actually a Section 8 inspector when I was 23 years old. And after Hurricane Andrew, all the folks left Miami-Dade County, sold their properties. A lot of folks purchased the properties and turned them into rental properties. And so that was the scenario that we were in the county back in '92. And so we still don't have enough home ownership. And so the key here is to help out with home ownership. I know that we're sitting on some money in the county. There's always funding to help first-time home ownership or just home ownership as a whole. Because when folks own their houses, they're not going to sell. But I'll also make another note. What about those folks that have lived there for a long time? And now all of a sudden, you know, their value of their house has risen over time and they want to sell it. You know, so I think there's a balance that we have to strike there, because those folks are going to be upset as well that if we impose any restrictions on them that won't allow them to maximize their profit. As an American, I think that's our dream to try to, you know, live out. So home ownership is the key to this.
Thanks very much. I've got a couple of pairs of questions that I'm going to ask two of you to answer. The first pair is going to be for Mr. Farias and Mr. Hill. And that is this, and it kind of dovetails with our discussion here about gentrification. And that is, what do you propose to do to address the economic inequality that is so prevalent across Miami-Dade County today, and particularly prevalent in South Miami-Dade near the coast. Mr. Farias, income inequality.
Okay, first we got to look at the underlying factors, Dave, and that's jobs, education, and transportation, which all leads to opportunities. Okay, the disparities that we have in these communities is because of lack of opportunities, and we need to do all of these things. One, we need to make sure that we have jobs with a good living wage, so people can be able to support their families. We got to do partnerships with schools and libraries. Okay, we need to make sure that any and all future economic engines give back to the community to build more opportunities. And I want to be clear on one thing, Dave, that we're not saying that we need a handout, because we're not asking for a handout, just a hand up.
Thank you. Mr. Hill.
Great question, Dave. Thank you very much. You know, being a business lawyer for the last 24 years, I've worked with a number of small businesses, entrepreneurs, nonprofit organizations. Job insecurity leads to economic insecurity. Economic insecurity leads to housing insecurity. It's all tied together in South Dade. We are so disconnected from the rest of the county. We are not getting our fair share of the opportunity to be able to share in the dreams that we have. So we must look at more jobs. However, in South Dade, we have to look at the types of jobs that are, right? And as it connects to housing, are we earning enough? Maybe 80% of the annual median income is best for people to qualify. The thing is that we are priced out. We're priced out of the whole housing market. So we must be able to get people to have the types of jobs that they need. For example, during this COVID-19 period, we could consider a remote location where folks, administrative assistants, legal assistants, paralegals, secretaries could go to a location and use the technology in South Dade to do the things that they do on Miami Beach, in Doral, and downtown. That's the type of business logistically we could look at for them to take the cost of traveling to those jobs 2 hours away and have more security, leaving more monies in their pockets to pay for that down payment for the home that they need.
Thank you very much. Okay, now I've got a question for Representative McGhee and Mr. Maldonado, and it's this. You each had different vantage points 2 years ago during or a year ago, I'm sorry, during the legislative session in this heated debate about sanctuary cities, which of course we don't have in Florida, but it was a thing anyway, right? So the issue though, underlying that debate and the label that was put on it is still present regarding immigration, undocumented residents, and the federal enforcement of immigration law and how that intersects with local law enforcement and other government and public agencies. So what role can the county and county government play in this debate that's given this sanctuary cities label? Mr. Maldonado, you can go first.
Thank you, Lane. I had to unmute myself. So the item of sanctuary cities. Well, I got to tell you, I grew up in Homestead, and I think that's ground zero for what we would call illegal immigrants that are there. As an IT person, and I actually work in the agriculture industry, you know, I see firsthand the challenges that these families have had. And you know what? It's been a challenge because why? We understand our agriculture community needs folks that are going to work it. And the people that work it and have worked it over time have been the immigrant population. And so the challenge is where we as a county or as a city, you know, how do we partake in that situation? And I think, you know, we've seen a county in the past take, you know, there's a lot of underlying issues. For example, when ICE or the federal government wants to get involved and dealing with illegal immigrants, you know, they want us, the county or the cities, to give them support. And the problem with that is that it's costing us money, that money we don't have. And so it's not fair for the federal government to try to, you know, put that on us. Now, I think in Homestead, I'm just going to be honest. I mean, we've always been kind of protective of our community, the sanctuary city down there. It's not a known sanctuary city, but there's a sense of protection because they're essential to the agriculture community, which is our backyard. And so It's a lot of layers of politics. Unfortunately, there's a funding issue that's involved that gets involved in this. So, you know, sanctuary cities, I don't, you know, the federal government is going to say, hey, if you become a sanctuary city, we're going to pull your funding. And that's funding that we're already running on a deficit. So you're going to go ahead and pull that funding. We're going to have some issues.
Representative McGhee, you had a ringside seat in Tallahassee for this debate.
Yes, I did, and I believe we fought it. And listen, Dave, at the end of the day, I was born here in Homestead, right? Born and raised in Naranja. Been here all my life, with the exception of going off to colleges and coming back. And the one thing I can tell you is my time at Naranja Elementary, Chapman Elementary, Redland Middle School, and South Day Senior High, I've never met an illegal alien or illegal immigrant. For anyone to suggest that anyone in this South Day community should carry a title of illegal is, in my humble opinion, playing into the hands of those in Washington, D.C. and those who want to see a divided community. We must first root out those particular words because they're very offensive. Secondly, when it comes down to our brothers and sisters who are here, the plan should be this. The county should not be in the business of circumventing the system in order to help the federal government do something that you and I both is completely wrong and immoral. Rounding people up simply because you can with no probable cause, but simply saying they are some form of illegal word is not only disheartening, but it suggests that there is a moral compass that does not point to the right direction to benefit our community. And that's why we fought in Tallahassee, to ensure that not only we prevent people from being labeled illegal immigrants or illegal aliens, we fought to ensure that they have a seat at the table. And the Supreme Court recently has actually said the exact same thing that we've been saying. When you are here and you see migrant workers and you see African Americans and whites and Hispanics all coming together to build a one South Day, we would never refer to each other as illegal immigrants and illegal aliens. Those are political words used to divide us, and we should be ashamed to suggest that those words should describe our people.
Thanks very much. I want to go now to another very big topic in our community, and that's the fallout from the tragedy in Minneapolis with George Floyd's killing, the uprising of people-driven community protests around the country and in our own community that's become so prevalent. So this is really open-ended here for me. Where are you on this? Where do we go from here on racial justice, Black Lives Matter, excessive use of force, and community oversight? And I'd like, on the community oversight portion, I'd like for you in your comment, in your remarks, to please address the issue that came before the County Commission just this week about restarting the police review panel, a citizen-led panel that would have perhaps subpoena power, perhaps not. Needs funding, how much? So let's go there, and we'll start at the top. Mr. Farias.
Okay, Dave, I'm gonna ask you a question, but first I wanna say that when you use the term illegal alien, I find it very disrespectful, especially as a Hispanic and an immigrant myself and my family. So I just want to be clear on that. It's very disrespectful. Now, to answer your question, what I saw was sickening, what happened to Mr. Floyd. And I urge all Americans to turn away from this sickness that plagues this country. Now, as far as the board, I'm for the board because it's gonna strengthen the trust within the community. It's going to build better community relations. So police can continue doing the public safety job that they were trained to do. And as far as now reforms, these are my reforms for this type of stuff. One, I want to require officers to de-escalate situations by communicating with the subjects and maintaining larger distances. I want to be able to have policy that exhausts all means not using deadly force, and allow officers to intervene and stop when other officers are using excessive force, and revamp the 911 call center to direct the non-violent calls to mental health departments or other than police intervention. Because look, police officers are not social workers or mental health professionals. They were trained to keep public safety. So we got to stop burning them with all these extra jobs.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hill.
Dave, in the history of my community leadership here in Miami-Dade County, one thing that I've learned very clearly is that you cannot build a community with broken relationships. What is happening nationally with regards to the relationship between our law enforcement, police departments, and communities across the country is home as well, where we need to look at the health of this relationship. The majority of our police department are filled with great men and women leading us and protecting us and keeping us safe. What is broken across the country and locally is just trust, right? It's the same reason why you wear a mask during COVID-19 is to protect each other from spreading of the virus. The virus is lethal force used in the wrong way, right? We must develop an environment where we are protecting each other and building trust and accountability. Where I stand on this is my vote as Commissioner Hill would have been for the IRP, adding and subpoena power, because we have to be able to create an environment to review the investigations that are there. We have to create an environment in terms of setting policy that addresses repeated misconduct, even a single misconduct. We have to set an environment and a policy with regards to addressing professional standards. These are things that are going to improve the relationship between law enforcement and our community for us to have a healthy relationship, whichever community, irrespective of socioeconomic status. These are some of the things that we have to work on. And I'll say, close with this, Dave. In addition to that, we have to talk to each other in our communities. Don't just wave at your neighbor. You have to have conversations, have more convenings. Over the last 24 years, my life has been filled with convening communities together and organizations together to what? Build healthier communities with healthier relationships. This is the only way for us to be transformational.
Thank you so much. Mr. Maldonado.
Thank you. Before we move on to that question, I want to make sure that we're following the guidelines that were set before us and taking shots at us. I just want to be clear. I'm not the kind of individual that does the politics too well. I'm always going to answer the question exactly how you ask it. The question was sanctuary cities. Obviously sanctuary city has to do with illegal immigrants. And so I work with them all the time. So I think you guys need to cut that out. So that's that. Moving forward, we're talking about our current situation, what we're dealing with right now. Right now, everyone in America, there's no one that I've spoken to that does not agree to what happened to George Floyd was an injustice and wrong, and we are 100% behind that. The issue is with the community, how we're moving forward to deal with injustice, social injustice. Now, you asked a question. I didn't hear anyone answer yet. The oversight panel, the committee panel of the community panel, excuse me, that's something that was in place in the past. And for whatever reason, what was the effectiveness of it was the first question. We'd have to go back into the minutes and see how effective were they. I partook in some of their minutes and some of their videos, and it was a lot of good conversations and policy, to try to ease the issues. But the issue that we're having right now with this panel is the funding. The funding is everything right now. Right now, as a county, we are strapped right now for cash, especially during this COVID. We have issues that are going to come down the pipe that has to do with housing, jobs, dealing with the COVID, and the funding that we're going to have to seek for this is going to be in the millions of dollars. We're talking about lawyers, private investigators, community panelists. The cost in that is going to be pretty significant. So I just want to bring it up to the conversation piece. I know we have one down. I'm willing to sit down and work with them. I know that they create good policy. It's a tool as long as we can fund it. Funding is going to be the question, or how we're going to do that. And above all, what we need to do, again, another issue, we're talking about defunding the police or, removing their money, that we need money to go back into the training, de-escalation. Those areas are going to help our officers be more effective and know how to deal with people the right way.
Thank you very much. Representative McGhee.
Hey, thank you very much for that question, Dave. Let's be absolutely clear. I am a former prosecutor, a former community prosecutor. I am also a defendant, former ex-offender. I've been arrested. I'm also a victim of police brutality. I know what it's like to be beaten by law enforcement, someone that you trust. Also know what it's like to be thrown in jail for something you didn't do in order for law enforcement to cover its tracks. I also know what it's like to receive justice. And that justice came to me in the form of a lawsuit that we settled out of court. And I was able to use those funds to go off to college and come back to this community and serve in a very productive manner. So you asked a question about the George Floyd situation and how does it apply and how we can move forward. It first has to go back to where we began. You remember a while back, Dave, when kids used to run up to police cars and the police officers used to come out and hand out either rubber bands or some form of toys or candy? That simple act of kindness is what we seek today. We simply are saying we want to reform the trust between law enforcement and the community. The question is, how do you do that? First of all, you have to engage into community policing. You have to have the representation be based upon proportionality of the people within the community. You also would have to include individuals from the community to help out with the hiring process. And as it relates to what took place in the county commission, that is another avenue that we can explore to show that we are serious about restoring that trust between law enforcement and the community. And finally, Dave, I'll say this, and I am the biggest person to say it. As a former defense attorney, as a former prosecutor, as a defendant, and as a victim, I can tell you this. There are not many bad officers within our local force here. But unfortunately, when you have a few bad individuals and the majority refuse to speak up against those bad individuals, it creates the atmosphere that all are bad. And so we have to, again, realize that if we're going to change this thing, and if we're going to produce more Kionne McGhees who could have looked at the system and said it was broken because it failed me and it beat me, but I chose to get involved in it and help it change from the inside, if we want to do that, we have to change through what I call the important word of the day, communications. Words do matter, Dave. And we've seen wars started, we've seen kingdoms fall, and we've seen communities grow and broken based upon simple words. And that's why certain words that are political words should be outcast within our community.
Thanks very much. Okay, gentlemen, I want to move to another broad topic. And this was, we touched on it with some of the individual questions earlier. And this is about the environment. And it's a really important issue in South Miami-Dade, right? It's the gateway to the Keys. You have the National Park. It's the South Bay, the agricultural areas. There are so many things that come together. And it's one of the most vulnerable low-lying areas in the county, susceptible to sea rise. Then there's the evergreen issue that comes before the county commission seemingly on a regular basis. And that's the urban development boundary. Where it is, should it move, should it not move, to accommodate development or a highway. That was the latest one, right? So I want to ask you this, that whole basket of environmental issues, what are your top priorities if you're representing District 9 and South Miami-Dade? Those many things, you can't fight them all. Which ones are you going to fight, and why are those most important to you? Let's start, let's change it up. Let's start from the bottom, and let's let Representative McGhee take this one first.
Thank you, Dave. So Dave, the beauty of being in South Dade is that to the west we have the Everglades, and to the east we have the Biscayne, and to the north we have the beaches in Miami-Dade County, north end, and to the south we have the Florida Keys. We are geographically located and situated in the best area, in my humble opinion, in all of the state of Florida. Transportation, because it all goes back to transportation, accounts for 28% of the carbon emission that we're speaking about. Home heating and cooling accounts for about 17%. We're talking about this type of carbon emission, and we're talking about greenhouse gases that contribute to the respiratory issues, but also contribute to what we're seeing with the sea level rise. So we're talking about, yes, we have to build those seawalls, but we also have to get back to the basics. And the basics surrounding the issue of transportation deals directly with many of these. Dave, you opened up in the beginning. You talked about how Mother Earth and Mother Nature are finally coming back because we've been off the road. you ask yourself this question, and to the listeners, why? That's because, again, not that many drivers were on the road. So if we remove that factor out of the way and give the South Dade people the rail, we can reduce at least the carbon emissions and deal with the greenhouse gases by a percentage that would actually benefit us. There's no better place than South Dade right now. And that's why we have to look at transportation and follow those studies that came out of Harvard that said if you want to trap a community, you simply reduce or fail to give a sufficient form of transportation to that area. And so that's how we deal with it.
Thanks, Representative McGhee. Mr. Maldonado, what's your top environmental issue for District 9? You're muted, sir. Strike two.
Your IT guy keeps muting me. So listen, the reason why folks come to South Dade and down south is to take advantage of the beauty that surrounds us. We are flanked to, we have the state park, we have the Everglades, we have the Florida Keys, we have all the beauty that people are coming here to want to see and partake of that beauty here. Now, the question is, how are we going to protect that? And one of the questions you asked was the UDB. Well, we know that that's a very important, boundary that we have. And it's been put there in place, obviously, for our protection. For the protection of what? For our aquifer system. What is our state, in the state of Florida, if we all know, the water runs under us, we have aquifers that we're sitting on top of. And if we move those UDBs in a negative method, it's going to impact our aquifer that will impact our quality of life. Imagine that we have to deal with mitigation with dealing with that aquifer and trying to repair it. We're talking about millions and millions of dollars. And so the protection of UDB is important. Yes, there's discussion. Are we going to move it? Where can we move it? That's a balance that we have to talk about. Because again, going back to what I mentioned earlier, when you're looking about sea level rise, if you use that map and you look at how sea level rise is going to affect us, there are folks, businesses, developers, companies that are looking for a plan B and where we're going to have to relocate if the water does rise. If the water does rise, I can tell you by looking at that map, all of the west area is going to be impacted significantly. And so that's something that we're going to have to discuss. But right now, of course, we're going to have to protect the UDB because it's protecting our aquifer and it protects the ecosystem that everyone comes down here and spends money in Homestead and in South Dade because they want to take advantage of the beauty there. So that's my stance on that.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hill.
One of the reasons why we live in South Dade, because we love it so much, is because of the beauty and the environment. I grew up in South Miami Heights across from Larry and Penny Thompson Park, which is south of the zoo. We have the Everglades National Park, Kionne National Park. You have the agricultural areas where it's just as beautiful environmentally. It is something to behold, and it's really part of our character, it's part of our economy, and it's something that we must preserve. Before we had all of this development, we had the Pine Rocklands and this natural heritage that existed in South Dade. So we have to treasure this natural heritage and celebrate it as well. That is something that, as a young lawyer, I was a part, Dave, of passing the Safe Neighborhood Parks Bond Initiative in terms of our open spaces. This is something that is important for us to preserve this green space and preserve these park spaces that we have so that our families can have a quality of life, playing soccer or flying a kite or different things. We need to pay attention to that. Another issue and priority that I would have with regards to the issue of saltwater intrusion, with regards to the aquifer and our water quality as well. That's a problem. If you look at your map with regards to the flood areas, South Dade is high on the map in regards to the red, orange, and yellow. And if you look south of Black Point Marina all the way down the county line, it's a problem. And we need to make sure that we are investing in the mitigation in terms of reducing flooding in the area as well.
Thank you. Mr. Farias, your top environmental issues.
Yes. Since climate change is a national and international crisis, and look, all I hear is stuff at the federal level that as a county commissioner, you can't do. But as a county commissioner, I'm gonna tell you what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna focus myself on the sea level rise. I pledge to develop an environmental policy that mitigates the sea level rise in Miami-Dade. through adaptation and new technologies, because that's where a county like Miami-Dade can be most effective. By one, using a permeable asphalt that absorbs water up to 880 gallons a minute, which can prevent flooding in the areas that are flooding right now at the second. By changing the zoning code to build with standards that start the adaptation process for future construction, just like we did and changing the code after Hurricane Andrew. And open spaces, look, open spaces are important because they give equity to the community. I'm a father of 5, and I myself have done the picnic in the park, the T-ball programs, Girl Scouting, and now I'm even exercising there. So I, like no other, know it's vital. But as stewards of the land, we must also protect the Everglades and our wetlands. And as far as the UDB, we don't need to move the UDB. As a councilman, I know we have thousands of square footage of available land that's developable right now. So we don't need to move the land right now. Let's focus on what we have now. That's why I said earlier, we need to make sure we got the inventory correct.
Thanks very much. I'd like to stay on this topic for a couple of specific questions, and I'll ask each of you one. I want to start back with Mr. Maldonado, because you mentioned the aquifer, and I know that there's been an issue in South Dade with the cooling canals at the FPL plant, and the proposal to solve some of that problem with deep well injection, taking some of that water and sending it deep into the deepest aquifer. Where are you on that subject?
So I could tell you that I remember a few years ago when we were dealing with that specifically. It was in the paper. Everyone knew we had a fear of radiation that was found in the water, and through that issue, we had, we dovetailed to the conversation and how we're going to protect that aquifer. The ones that are closest to the South Dade are the ones that are in danger of the saltwater intrusion. So, again, we're going to have to rely on our experts. I'm not an expert, but I paid attention to what they said. And I know at the end of the day, understanding the state of Florida as a whole and who we are as a state and as a county, that aquifer is key to our survival, So we have to, if we're talking about deep water injection, if that's the method that our scientists and our professionals are guiding us, we have to rely to them. Now, I have the ability to do research, look at data, again, being a IT analyst, look at the data and try to handle this with a data-centric mindset. And, what are the methodologies that we're going to be able to implement to secure that aquifer that is key to our sustainability here in South Dade? Thank you.
Representative McGhee, the issue of the bay and the health of the bay isn't just a South Dade issue. It's the entire coast of Miami-Dade County, right? So one of the issues that comes up repeatedly is the health of the bay is compromised by all the runoff, all the nutrients that end up in the water that runs off into the bay. What can you do from a seat in the county commission to help influence that equation to improve the health of the bay, which is so pronounced for South Dade?
And again, Dave, that is another great question. First of all, you got to take the politics out of the expertise. So what we're seeing right now is depends on who you're speaking with here in the county, and depends who is the lobbyist and who is being paid the top dollars. That determines what report is actually produced and what the results should be. What we should do at this particular moment is not to bring forth lobbyists to come in and give us the footprint on how to deal with the runoff. One of the things we can do is look directly to the University of Florida, the University of Miami, FIU, and Miami-Dade, and University of Miami, if I haven't mentioned them, and get their scientists in the room, because they don't have that political reason and for favor to make a right decision. One of the things we know that works is simply doing this. That is maintaining a wall, maintaining connection with a conversation and through communication with the scientists to deal specifically with that. Some of those questions actually popped this head up in Tallahassee, where we actually were dealing with that. How do we deal with those nutrients? How we handle that? Well, on the county level, it makes that much more sense for the county to make it the priority if we want to ensure that what we're leaving back for our children and our grandchildren will be that they can live a quality of life that is conducive to growth, success, and understanding that we as a nation and as a county can actually benefit from. So that's what I would definitely do. I am not a complete expert, but what I do know as an attorney is that when you are an attorney and you need an expert, sometimes experts, and especially in the political world, they'll say what they need to say in order to ensure that you're happy. So we need to take the politics out of it, and that means we have to go directly to those scientists who are at our schools, our local schools in the University of Florida, Florida State, and deal primarily with that issue.
Thanks. Mr. Hill, another issue that is countywide, but also of concern, and particularly in District 9, is the sewage system for the county. It's been plagued by problems, sewage breaks. We have the longstanding issue of that outfall pipe that sends so much of our sewage out to sea. But then by the same token, there's a looming issue that is all the aging septic tanks throughout the county. I think there's a 2018 report from the county that there could be as many as 67 to 70,000 of those that will be in danger of failing soon. So that's a big money item. How do you deal with that from a seat on the commission?
Dave, I hope you're not having a second home. One of the issues here, Dave, is that we have to rely on those organizations that are leading on this issue. Organizations like Miami Waterkeeper need to lean on these organizations and partner. One of the reasons why we are gathered here as a community and Miami-Dade County families for us to convene and to lean on each other to address these issues. We obviously need to take a look at our budget with regards to these long-term investments. Whether these long-term investments have to do with our sewage system or transportation, these are things that our citizens need to speak up about, because we must invest in the repair of our infrastructure. It's aging, there's going to be continued more breakages, and if we allow the leaks into Biscayne Bay along the coastline there, then that's going to impact our water quality and also our health and hygiene as well. So it's all connected. We must be taking a look at these long-term investments to repair and replace our sewage systems for the long term.
Thank you very much. Mr. Farias, also an environmental issue, are contaminated sites. There are many throughout the county, as probably as many as 75 brownfields. Some sites, I believe, around Homestead Air Reserve Base. At the county level, since the federal management of those sites seems to have evaporated in the last decades, what can happen at the county level to address those long-standing, literally below the surface pollution issues that we have throughout the county?
All right, Dave, I actually sat on one of the park that was contaminated, and the county had to get money to clean up the park. Now, we need to make sure that all open spaces like the parks are protected. And look, I'm an electrician. I'm not going to sit here and be like, I'm a analysis and career politicians are going to give you these scholarly answers from the fix, because they're not experts. Okay, but I'm going to get the experts. For instance, like when you talk about the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, get with them, get with our congresspersons, get with the scientists and people that know about these things, and sit at the table and make sound choices, but make a choice and lead like that.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're getting down toward the end of our time. I'm going to go through at least one more round of questions for everyone, and then we will move forward. And one of my favorite questions to ask is about the issue of preemption and the push and the pull and the tug of war between Tallahassee and local government. So I'm going to ask all of you very briefly about that, to tell me your view of that. Representative McGhee, you're an interesting position on this one, right? Because you've been at one end of that rope and you're trying to move to the other end of that rope. So the who should be in charge of what issues is a never-ending one. Where do you stand on preemption and the many things that that touches?
Great question, Dave, and you're absolutely right. From the state level, we fought the state to ensure that they did not encroach into the areas that are locally controlled. In Miami-Dade County, we have what we call a home rule charter. It essentially gives the county the power to act in a manner and fashion that best fits its people. Unlike other counties, many other counties, they don't have the home rule charter that gives us that power, that allows for us that constitutional power to help with our people here. I am absolutely 100%, 1000% against any encroachment on local ability to control and deal with the issues that it relates to its people. Preemption is 100% wrong. It was one of our top priorities in Tallahassee to prevent the state from moving in. And I understand clearly this is a nonpartisan race, but let's be absolutely clear. For the past 20 years, there has been one party that has controlled the Supreme Court, the legislature, the cabins, and along with appointments to certain boards. So it has always been a push to attack Miami-Dade because Miami-Dade is a donor county. And in being a donor county, everybody wants to take from us. And the best way you take from Miami-Dade is that you attempt to prevent us from doing certain things without first getting permission from the state. That is absolutely wrong. Again, it goes against our moral compass, and it goes against everything the Home Rule Charter has given us when we implemented it in our Constitution.
Thank you. Mr. Maldonado, you had a different view of that tug of war from your seat on City Council. How did that play out for you and your colleagues when the debate was about banning plastics or sunscreen, or one that makes more sense, writing rules at the state level to govern things like ride-sharing companies across a county line where you can't have different rules? How does preemption play out from a local seat on a local governing commission?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. You know, I've been fortunate since being an elected official with the City of Homestead since 2009. These last 10 years, I was partook in a few committees where one with the Miami League of Cities. Miami-Dade League of Cities is, you know, all the municipalities that pretty much band together to talk about and defend our home rule against preemption from the state, where we basically had to, and I also chaired the Transportation Committee and the Economics Committee for the Florida League of Cities. So I've been, since day one, fighting preemption from Tallahassee and the leaders there. It's a shame that we have to spend our time to defend what they clearly know and understand is the law. They know what they can and cannot do, but yet we have to have formed the Florida League of Cities, Miami-Dade League of Cities, take time from our families to go over to Tallahassee and fight those politicians that want to impose their will on us. Unfunded mandates. I think we all understand that. They're asking us to do things and they don't provide no funding for it. They just say, well, you know what? We think this is a great idea. We're going to go ahead and implement it. And then they look to you in order to actually do the work. And so there's a cost factor in that. And again, we have dealt with this for the last 10 years. And thank God for those organizations like the Miami-Dade League of Cities, the Florida League of Cities that are working with us, the policymakers as elected leaders, to fight and to understand that. Because when we come into office, you know, I'm a network engineer, I do IT stuff, I work on a daily basis. You know, I didn't go to school to become a politician or to know every single law that's there. But we have those leaders and those policymakers that are there working alongside with us. And because of those organizations, we were able to fight that preemption up in Tallahassee.
Thank you very much. It wouldn't have been a good candidate for him if somebody didn't say unfunded mandate. So thank you for taking care of that.
No problem.
One more topic I want to touch on with Mr. Hill and Mr. Farias, and that is the census. Now, in a normal census year, that's a big deal and gets lots and lots of attention. But for all the other issues that we're dealing with right now, it's kind of been an afterthought. But it's a very important process. It's important for representation above all other things, but that also then plays out to federal funding and a number of other ways. So, Mr. Hill, what's your view of the census and the particular challenge in a community like South Miami-Dade with so many people who may be undocumented or have undocumented family members and have a fear of filling out those government forms?
Well, first and foremost, we must get the word out to them to have no fear, because answering the census is such a very important part of our democracy. It is absolutely critical. In South Dade, we have 85% is unincorporated, and we have about 15% that is incorporated. We need to ensure right now we're not doing as well in our response rate. Palmetto Bay +%, but Homestead is lagging at 50+%. We need to get our response rates up. For every single person, Dave, that does not answer the census, we are leaving at least $1,700 on the table. This is very important to all the resources that are going to be allocated for the needs of every single resident, documented or undocumented. In order for this county to have the resources necessary, 2.8 million people, we must have the proportionate, commensurate dollars to provide the services that we need. So please go to my2020census.gov. It takes you 5 minutes to respond. Those response rates up, Florida City, Homestead, Naranja, all these communities, you need to respond, because if you have any needs here discussed this afternoon, any of these needs about our insecurity, housing security, insecurity, transportation insecurity, food insecurity, all these insecurities are going to be funded based on the allocation of our response rate.
Thank you so much. Mr. Farias, what's your view of the census process?
Dave, being you already explained what the census is, I'm not going to go into that, but I'm going to tell you as a councilman, this is what I've done so far. Right before COVID hit, I had several town halls, one in Florida City and another one in Homestead and in other areas, where I reached out to the community and had members of the NAO, which I'm a member of, to come down and explain why it's so urgent and important that they be counted. I'm also a board of directors of Central Campesino, where we applied for grant and money to make sure that we get the word out, and we're still doing it to this day. So I haven't just been trying to get the word out. I've been getting the word out from the very beginning.
Thank you so much. We've touched on a wide variety of topics, and I appreciate your candor and the depth of your responses. I'd like to go now to closing comments. So again, 90 seconds, 2 minutes max. Summarize your position. What makes you the best candidate to represent District 9 on the County Commission? And because we started at the top at the beginning, we're going to start at the bottom alphabetically, going back up. So Representative McGhee, we'll let you close first.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you to the foundation, and thank you to the Miami Herald. This past legislative session, many of us had seen some things that we hadn't seen before. That was, we dealt with issues of transportation, we dealt with issues of affordable housing, we dealt with issues related to the South, as it relates to education, as it relates to increases in pay for state workers. Now, that was something that we hadn't seen in quite some time. I served as the leader of the minority caucus. That allowed for me to work hand in hand with the speaker and with other colleagues in order to craft a budget and also craft policy that benefits our people. I was at the table of over a $90 billion budget. But don't take that for it. Take the work I've already done. One shouldn't have to run for office to prove that they can get things done. Before I ran for office, I was a community prosecutor here, where I worked in the community to help. Secondly, was born and raised here. Thirdly, I have received the support of SEIU, AFL-CIO, ASME, the current commissioner, Commissioner Dennis C. Moss, along with countless other county sitting commissioners who have come out openly and publicly to endorse me. Why? Because they know I not only have the experience, but I also have the passion and the love for the South Dade community. I've been here all my life. I didn't just come here because I wanted to build a resume. I came here because I am South Dade. This is all we have. And if we don't have the opportunity to fight for those things that are important to us by people who understand how important it is, then we're going to lose out. So Dave, I thank you very much, man. And I really do appreciate what you and the Miami Herald are doing. We're going to take this home to the Miami Commission, and I'm going to bring that experience and expertise that I have gained in my life, whether it's in a jail cell or whether it's in the housing projects or whether it's in the legislature. I'm going to bring it to the table to ensure that South Dade has its voice, because it's not about a new day. It's about where were you yesterday and the day before that and 5 years before that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Representative. Mr. Maldonado.
All right, I'm you. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to share with the masses who we are and our experiences and our challenges. Again, at this time, I would tell you, what makes me the candidate, I guess is the question, right? So commitment and experience. Since the age of 17, I was an outreach counselor working with at-risk kids, the migrant families, doing gang prevention and drug prevention since a young age. I was also working for HUD, again, in my earlier 20s, working on affordable housing issues. And as an inspector for the Section 8 program, so I know firsthand and have seen over time the affordability issues and the housing issues that we have. Also, I've been the president of my HOA. And so obviously I got involved in the HOA, and what led me to here is because I just, I've always found myself as part of the solution. When I see a problem, by nature, I have to jump in. It's something that's built into me. I think it's a calling or my DNA. I mean, it's what led me to become an IT analyst, where on a daily basis for the last 20 plus years, I've been solving problems that my clients bring to me. They're technical. I used to say when I first ran that if I could make 2 computers across from the east to west connect and communicate, then I think I could solve some of these underlying problems that we have on the city and county level. Also, as an elected official, for the last 10 years, I've served on budgets. We've dealt with budgets, parks, quality of life, all these areas. So 10 years in the city council, a lifelong experience, a lifelong member of South Dade, and I'm the reason why you guys should vote for me on August 18.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hill, your closing argument.
Thank you very much, Dave, and thank you to the Miami Foundation, the Miami Herald, and all the stakeholder community organizations that allowed us this opportunity to share our vision for South Miami-Dade County and also for Miami-Dade County as well. Dave, South Miami Heights welcomed me and embraced me as I rode my bicycle to Caribbean Boulevard to school at Miami Southridge every day when I arrived here in 1985. And I remember it like yesterday. In one of my first classes, I stood up to answer a teacher, and all the kids started to laugh and to make fun of me because of big, skinny kid, big glasses. But my late grandmother always taught me to give respect and dignity to each person from wherever they're from. Miami Southridge, my principal, Dr. Rogers, my counselor, they poured into me, gave me an opportunity to go to school. I went away, did all the right things, came back home with an education, and bought my first home in South Dade in 2000 with the love of my life, Cutler Hill, right here in South Miami-Dade County. I immersed myself in Miami-Dade County community, working with the United Way, passing the Safe Neighborhood Parks Bond Initiative, counseling hundreds of as a business lawyer and nonprofit organizations in South Dade as well, working with young people, mentoring at school. All these issues have given me an inside view on the shared challenges and the shared dreams that we all have together. We are going to build resilience together, and we are going to come out of this anxiety of this COVID-19 period much stronger than we have ever before, but we can only do it together. And I know for a fact that on August 18th, a new day is coming for leadership in South Miami-Dade County and Miami-Dade County as well. I thank you, and I look forward to earning your vote. When you vote by mail, vote early, and please vote by 6:59 p.m. on August 18th.
Thank you very much. Mr. Farias, you get the last word.
Dave, I want to thank you again and the Miami Foundation for having us. Dave, I'm Sean, the construction worker. I'm Maria, that bus driver. Bill, the accountant, and Louis, the engineer. I'm your neighbor. I'm that person that lives in the community across from you. I'm that person stuck in that traffic for 2 hours, paying $9 a toll every day. I bring effective leadership that derives from leading my whole entire life. Okay? I'm a real working person, a leader that knows what a real budget is. Not a budget with 120 other people or another council, a real budget, one that signs the payroll checks myself, a job maker, not someone that wants to take off jobs to computers. But I'm going to do something different, like actually bring results. I'm not a fighter, Dave. Anyone can fight. I'm a gladiator. Leaders don't fight. We send in fighters. And my endorsements are from regular people, not career politicians that with failed policies that have put us down this hole today. More importantly, I'm not going to wait 8 or 10 years to want to do something. I'm going to do it now. We have career politicians making us believe that they're going to fix what they've messed up. I got a question for you. And this is for South Bay and for Homestead. In the last 8 or 10 years, has your quality of life been better? Has homes been affordable? Tolls? The streets? I don't think so. So if you want someone that's going to bring results, you want someone that's action. I humbly ask for your vote on August 18th. My phone number is 786-286-7815. And you can go to my website, www.voteforjohnny.com. Thank you, everyone. Have a blessed night and be safe.
Thanks very much. Thank you, candidates. Thank you to our ASL interpreters. Thank you to the folks behind the scenes that made this go pretty darn seamlessly. And on behalf of the El Nuevo Herald and the Miami Herald, I want to thank the Miami Foundation and its partners for letting us be part of this conversation. Thank you all. Stay safe.